We have Chase Cunningham with us today. Hey, Chase, how's it going?
Howdy.
Maybe do you mind maybe starting by doing a quick intro on yourself?
Sure. So I'm a retired Navy chief. I was a cryptologist for my career. Then I was at NSA for a bit. I wrote curriculum around computer network exploitation. Then I was at Forrester and I launched all the zero trust stuff formally into the market. So I apologize if you're sick of hearing about zero trust. And I've been consulting since I left Forrester in 2020. And then most recently, last 2 years, I've been running Demo Force, which is the kind of company that I'm built, the platform I built to let people demo vendor software without all the kind of misery that we typically run into with vendor sales shenanigans.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah. So yeah, I feel with a background like that, the thing we absolutely have to talk about is kind of like zero trust. I'm kind of curious to, look, you called it, right? Like it's a pretty overloaded term at this point. But given that you were kind of, at the inception of all of this, I'm curious to kind of see from your perspective, like what's the history and where are we at today? Like what does it actually mean on the ground today, and like what can people do in a way with that?
I mean, ZT started out honestly with John Kindervag back about 15 years ago, 16 years ago, where he kind of coined the term and started talking about no more Chewy centers and how architected networks were built for ease of use and interoperability and sharing inside of the firewall instead of kind of removing trust relationships. And John honestly was about a decade ahead of the market, which, anyone that's ever been in the vendor space, being ahead of the market is not necessarily an easy thing because then you have to prove your validation. But it's migrated and kind of modified from there. I think COVID was kind of the linchpin in the zero trust approach because everyone went remote overnight and everybody had to figure out like how the hell to secure that connection. And then we also realized, well, hey, VPNs are not actually secure. They're just a pipe through an infrastructure, which is a problem. And the perimeter-based model of cybersecurity, I think I would argue categorically failed a long, long time ago. So, when we get to ZT, the biggest problem that we have is people going, well, I don't want to tell my employees I don't trust them. Well, number one, like I would tell my employees to their face, I don't trust you not to infect my network. Like I'm done with that all day long. It's not that I don't trust you to go out and have beer with me or babysit my dog or something, but I don't trust you that you might not click a link because people do that. And then the other side is you don't have to call a strategy zero trust. Like you can call it cyber tiddlywinks. No one cares. It's really like how you do what you do and do you deal with the realities of the inherent issues you face inside of infrastructure. And trust relationships are what cause compromise. People trusting links, systems trusting other systems, permissions being trusted for users that don't need them. Like it's a trust problem. So just remove that trust and you're doing better. And then there's the last kind of gripe and moan in the box of like, well, you'll never get to zero because then the networks wouldn't work. Correct. Just like if a bodybuilder gets to zero body fat, they die. But their goal is to get as low as possible. I mean, that's where we're at. So, I think we're in overall a pretty good space because technology now enables zero trust. And it's proving, I mean, if you thought you needed a different approach before, now that this AI crap is out there, like you had better get moving now because your legacy approach is going to fail.
Yeah, I usually try to present it positively to people. Not so much, it's not that I don't trust you, it's that you don't want to have to be trusted, right? Like, what if you do something that ends up, having a huge impact on the company? Like, just don't, we won't have to take that risk. That way, everybody's happy, like nobody's worried about that. Um, my first exposure to these concepts for me was around 2015 when I was at Google, and they called it
Beyond
Beyond Corp.
Corp. Yep.
Yeah. Is that I'll be honest, that's kind of like 90% of my exposure to that. Is that sort of the traditional, when you're talking about zero trust, that's essentially what you're thinking about?
Yeah, I reference Beyond Corp all the time, and it's funny that you were there because I was actually at Forrester doing some consulting on the Beyond
Nice.
Corp side on the back end of it, and I think that Google's Beyond Corp architecture is what zero trust looks like at the enterprise level. And the next argument you get from someone, well, Google can do anything because they have a license to print money. Sure, but they really, if you actually had been involved in the way they designed that architecture and what they did, they didn't spend any more money than they already were. They actually saved a bunch of money and re-architected where they moved towards the model that made the most sense for them. And I also like to remind people like the reason they did that was because they got their ass handed to them in Operation Aurora and they had to change and they changed into the Beyond Corp model, which is zero trust. Now, I'll tell you flat out, the reason they didn't call it zero trust is because they didn't want to pay Forrester a royalty, but that's a different story.
That's an interesting story. Yeah, yeah, for sure. I feel like I wasn't, in any way, shape, or form in those conversations, but I feel like it was more a question of conviction of like, yes, this is the way that it has to go. And look, let's be honest, Google is kind of a majority of a company of engineering. So I suspect that it was kind of like easier to convince people to go in that direction is and that's probably not the same for everybody out there. Is that what you still see as the major, like what's the major blocker at this point? Because you mentioned like there's more and more text during COVID. I know like we're using things like Google Workspace. Like I feel like all these technologies are moving forward. Is there still like a big problem?
Yeah, I mean, the big problem is it's kind of two-sided. One, it's the some of the vendors, I won't throw names out there, that have really jumped in the marketing side of this and just vomited their zero trust mantra out into the space and said they're zero trusty if you buy their stuff, which is not true. You could build zero trust with all open source stuff if you had the time and effort. It's not about the tech, it's about the strategy. And then the other one is no one ever wants to change because change sucks, and that is where people typically run into the wall. And I always, when I do like consulting engagements on zero trust, is I remind people that gym memberships sell from January 1st to February 15th, and then people realize that working out sucks and it's hard and it's uncomfortable and you don't get immediate change, and then the gyms just make money off of you for no reason because you're not going anymore. Um, like that's what you're dealing with here, and I mean, a lot of these organizations, they built architectures over 20, 30 years, and you're not going to fix that architecture strategically in 20, 30 days. It just is going to take time. The US government's allocated $2.3 billion to Zero Trust, and they have tens of thousands of people working on it. And so far, there's some orgs that are pretty far along, like Air Force and Marine Corps. But I mean, it's not everybody all the time. There's no, ZT sprinkle magic fairy dust on systems. It's architecture.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of the biggest difficulty is just because it's the exact point you just said, because it's not like here's the widget, right? Like here's the one technology, here's the one way to do things. It just ends up being diluted and cybersecurity being cybersecurity, any term that has any legitimate purpose immediately gets diluted to all hell by marketing. I have a zero trust mouse. Like, sure, okay.
Right? Like, I mean, and I mean, marketing's there's gravity to the fact that people market to it because that means there must be something there, but it does skew the actual value proposition and the reality of what's going on there. There's books published on zero trust, a bunch of really good ones. Go look at those. Don't go look at a slick from, whichever company. Go look at the stuff on Amazon.
Yeah, and so to this, as somebody that's kind of lived through the whole cycle there, um, is there something in your view of zero trust that has changed? Like, are we still essentially trying to build the same concept as the original thing, or have we kind of learned some lessons along the way of like, yeah, actually, we thought that part was a big deal, but nobody really does this anymore, and focus more here.
Yeah, I mean, policy engines have gotten to where they are useful in this context. You can actually do ZT at speed and scale with policy. The ML, which I hate saying AI, I tell people every time you say AI, a puppy died somewhere because I'm sick of hearing the term. It's not AI, it's ML. But you're able to apply this stuff at scope and scale with policies that learn and are able to get quicker, better, faster, which is where you want to be. Um, I still think the giant gap in the space is number one, data security is still the hardest thing to do in all of cyber because data is so ethereal, and data is also not even necessarily the term. It's more like uh, the gold of the organization, not even necessarily data. But and then the other one is we need to move off of thinking humans will ever not be humans. Like I abhor phishing training. We should get away from it and move towards browser isolation technology, those types of things. But people still are like, well, we're going to train our people. Cool, train them, but that won't stop breaches. And I mean, it's 2026 almost, and I think they just published a report that said the most popular password on planet Earth was still 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. I think it was now, but it has a bang at the end of it. So
Slowly getting better is what I'm hearing. So we're
I mean,
getting
it's
better.
longer with at least one special character now. I mean, I guess progress is progress, but
Oh boy. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So what's your these days, do you still do a lot of work in the zero trust side of things, or are you mostly focused on your new business? How's things on that for you?
no. So I still do a lot of consulting and guidance on ZT. Like I work with the federal government, I work with the government of Colombia and the government of Taiwan. I'm doing workshops on zero trust. I just got done with one in Japan. I'm doing one in Zurich and another one in Germany. And then actually the reason that I kind of built the Demo Force platform was so that I could let people do ZT with vendor software. And there's no risk of you screwing it up because the VMs reload if you dork it up. So that's kind of where we're at, but it's actual vendor software. And in my workshops, like we talk about microsegmentation, and then I get you into a microsegmentation product and you go build policy. It's not let's draw this crap on a whiteboard and talk about theory. It's like literally go do the policy thing.
Right, right, right. So this is bringing a question in my mind, and I don't know if I'm dating myself here, but um, software-defined networking was the hotness around the same time. I feel like there's sort of an overlap to both of them. Um, where do you see that overlap? Like, are people still deploying? That's like, how do you think about the two?
I mean, SDN is software virtualization sort of side of the equation. I mean, microsegmentation and these abilities to do things at a very, very granular level inside of systems with virtual appliances, be they agents or micro appliance or whatever you want to call them. I mean, that's where we're kind of at. And if you kind of back up, even just as an architect, and logically think about how you would want an architecture to look, I wouldn't build a bridge with three spans in it and be like, cool, the bridge will last 100 years. I would build a bridge with lots and lots of spans and bolts and things like that so that if one part failed, the rest of it stayed up. I think that's where we move towards with these software defined applications and networking and whatever else, where it is resilient in nature and it is able to be segmented correctly. You know, the firewalls, this will probably throw a grenade in the pool, but firewalls, I don't think were ever meant to be a security technology. I think they were meant to be a packet routing solution. And we just said, well, hey, if I put rules there, it's a security thing. Okay. But if someone modifies it and gets admin on the firewall, game over.
Right, right. I don't
That's
think
not
it's
very
that
micro. That's
conventional.
like macro segmentation.
Right, right, right. So, I mean, to me, what it's kind of like, what it's ringing as is it's kind of a question of defense in depth. Because in theory, if you had true zero trust, everything, everywhere, all the time, there's not much use for an actual, software like SDN.
Well, I
But
think defense in depth is actually expense in depth because, like, what most people do when they do the defense in depth is they go, I got IAM. Well, then I have to have this on top of that. And then I have to have this on top of that. And what we talk about in getting people to understand strategically around ZT is there's always stuff that I'm not going to be able to fix. And I don't want to waste my time on that. Like, it's contested space. It just is what it's going to be. And most of the folks that I've worked with or that I know that have moved towards like even Google too, move towards a real zero trust instantiation, they actually get rid of a lot of stuff because they found it as duplicative. And duplicative crap work just gums it up and it's not actually helping anybody. So I think that there's an approach, there's a
oh, I think we lost you. Let's wait for a minute. Hopefully it's just
Reach up,
oh,
internet blip.
okay, you're back. We just
Yeah.
lost you like 10, 15 seconds.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah, internet, you know how it is.
All good.
Probably the Chinese rerouting my traffic without me knowing about it, but
That's right.
yeah,
Going across the planet now.
yeah. So I mean, I think that that's worth it for people to understand. Like, it's if you're doing strategy correctly, you wind up offloading stuff rather than onboarding things for the sake of onboarding things.
Mhm. And so like if you're an enterprise and you are doing zero trust, like you called out, you probably can't move everything like 100% of that. So I guess that's where like software defined networking could be pretty useful, so that you can say like, hey, I'm going to carve out this part of the network, put it virtually in its own thing without physically having to go and like move, switches around and all that stuff. Is that?
Yeah, virtualization is super useful. I mean, it saves you cost and effort and a whole bunch of things, and it does work really better in the context of policy engine side of it. So, then I think somebody asked a question there on like doing ZT for 100K servers sounds like too much. Um, sure, I would say that you probably shouldn't start trying to fix 100,000 servers at once. Start like three or five and work your way going from there. And then the other piece is no one probably would say that they have totally valuable intellectual property on 100,000 servers. So what is not worth taking care of? And if you knock it from 100,000 down to 35,000, great, that's way more manageable.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Do you have any other advice, as you've probably seen more migrations than most people out there? Do you have like any advice on that approach? Like you just said, start with small. Do you see that there's still categories of things where, like don't even try to move that part onto it, or do this last or anything like that?
I mean, I personally am a big fan of don't think like a defender, think like an attacker. And if you think like an attacker, where are they going to gain access? And then what are they going to do? And then you flip that model on its head and you go, okay, well, if most compromises happen because people have crappy passwords, I'm going to do IAM and password management first. Problem solved. Okay, secondly, what's the next avenue of compromise? Stupid people clicking on phishing links. Okay, great. I'm going to put browser isolation in front of those people at least. And then next, like, well, what happens when a compromise does occur? Lateral movement is where it actually gets bad. So then I'm going to do segmentation, isolation, those things. And if you approach it from this perspective of I'm not defending, I'm removing the adversary's ability to be successful, you're gaining ground. Like you got to meet the bad guy at the door, rather than just going like I think if I have everything everywhere all the time and I have it perfect, they'll never hack me. The first thing I always talk to folks about during breach or ZT workshops, usually it's with the board. They ask us, well, if we move to zero trust, are we going to be unhackable? And it's like, no, no, I should leave because that's a waste of our time. Like,
Yeah, yeah. There's got to be less of that type of language,
oh, there's
right?
still people
Tell
that
me there
still are
is.
like, well, we want to be bulletproof, and it's like even a bulletproof vest ain't bulletproof.
Right.
Like, have you ever seen a 50 cal round? It'll go
Ex-
right through Kevlar.
Exactly. Unless you want to carry a house made of lead around you everywhere, you're gonna have trouble.
Yeah.
So what's the okay, like I feel like, that being said, zero trust, yeah, does buy you a ton of coverage of a bunch of shitty attacks, or limits the blast radius. What do you think is the next step here? Is do we know, like, do you think that like what the next step is? There kind of a next level of, I don't know if I wouldn't say segmentation, because zero trust inherently is kind of like the most segmentation you could have. But you mentioned browser segmentation. Is there anything else that you're looking at, like the next level of technologies that you think is going to have a big impact?
Yeah, I think I'm a big fan of like self-sovereign identity and verifiable credentials that are starting to show up all over the place. And I think that that is where IAM is going to morph and then probably die on its own sword. And what I mean by that is like the days of people having to manage usernames and passwords and all those things, even Active Directory to some degree, are going to be legacy. Because, I mean, if you just think about the way that you use your phones nowadays and passkeys and biometrics and those things, and the distributed ledger stuff that's running on the back end of it. Notice I didn't say Bitcoin or any of that crap. It's like that's where we're going, and it's because it's ease of use and because it's policy driven and because it's immutable, those types of things. So I think that that's the next logical evolution of what plugs into this architecture.
Do you think that looks like I think you called two different models that are pretty interesting, right? There's the going back to the basic principles, right? What I have and then what I am, right? So you mentioned biometrics, you mentioned like having a device. It's a super interesting topic, especially I would sort of say like in the US because of the kind of this kind of reluctance to like not dedicate but like give out this ultimate power in a way I find to some ultimate authority so what do you think that looks like the thing that you described?
I mean, I think the distributed ledger systems that are out there that are starting to, get adopted are going to be what drives that stuff going forward. And we also have people that are, I mean, yeah, you still have your tinfoil hat weirdos that are, not going to ever share their information with anybody and they just want to live in a hole in the ground. But the rest of us that are not, living in 1964 are accepting that we're going to have this technology tied to us till we're in the grave. So I think we're starting to see broader adoption of it. Like I fly all the time, and I mean it now. If you go to TSA, I flew this morning. I didn't even whip out my passport. They just did my biometrics, checked my boarding pass, and I got on the plane. Um, and that is way more preferable than me having to dig in my bag to find my passport. So I think we're lining up on where this goes in the future. Ease of use will trump, tech all the time.
Hmm. That is very interesting there, and I'm not gonna lie, there's part of me that's like I don't know. It's one thing when it's a work identity or here's an identity that yes I own and I use somewhere else, but for every possible identity available out there to be fundamentally inherently linked to like my biological self, I don't know. It hits differently, you know.
I mean, it is a little bit like hair on the back of your neck going up, but it's also, I worked at NSA, I worked at FBI, I worked at other government agencies. I tell people all the time, like, your credit card company knows more about you than the NSA ever will. So,
Oh, for sure, for sure. But it's yeah, yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting. So cool. So what else? Like you mentioned, like some of the demo stuff. Anything else that you wanted to like talk about that you're passionate about these days, or?
I mean, I'm the thing that stands out to me most that I'm putting a lot of effort into lately is dispelling this myth of the 3 million unfilled cyber jobs. I think that that's the greatest scam ISC squared and these other orgs have pulled. I was just talking to folks yesterday at a college, and there was four people I talked to, all different stages of their career. Each one had applied to more than 100 jobs, and none of them had gotten calls back. So like the statistics of that being likely across all those four people in different stages of their career with different levels of education doesn't sound right to me. I think that that's the thing that we, if I'm gonna rally the troops, like need to kind of drive at is it can't be both, folks. It's either there are lots of jobs and we're hiring, or there's not, and it's bullshit, and we need to find a way to deal with this more effectively.
And do you think there's sort of like a third door, which is there's a mismatch of skills to uh, like skill expected skill level to what people are hiring kind of thing, and that's kind of topical like with
Yeah,
AI,
because
right
we're
there.
letting Chat GPT write the job recs.
Yeah, so I wonder if that's part of that equation as well,
Oh,
where it's
for
like
sure. It's
everybody's
part of it.
expecting
Yeah.
a 10-year plus,
Yeah, I love what was the one guy that was like he wrote Rust, like he created Rust and they had a job out for somebody that for 5 years or whatever. He's like, I just created the language a year ago.
yes. That's classic. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, automation. I guess that's where there's going to
I
be a
mean, you can
lot.
automate yourself into failure just like you can automate yourself into success. And I think that that's what we're doing is we're automating ourselves into the corner.
Hmm, yeah. What do you think is the what do you think is the low hanging fruit in terms of automation that's not being done right now, like holistically in the industry?
I mean, honestly, holistically in the industry, what we should have is the ability for us to figure out what is the low-hanging fruit that's internet facing, automated, and then fix it or find the companies that don't fix it because that's how you fix problems.
Yeah, I like that. The low-hanging fruit is to find the low-hanging fruits in an organization. That's yep, that checks out. Cool. Well, thanks a lot for coming in. If folks want to get in touch with you, is there a better way to do that or?
I'm on LinkedIn pretty regular. I've got a YouTube channel that's out there, and then I've got the podcast stuff. So, and I typically, rant and rave on there just like I'm doing here. So, if you like it, jump on.
Awesome, awesome. Thanks a lot, and we'll see everybody at the next Defender Fridays. Have a good weekend.
Bye bye.